There's a moment, and every soldier in every war across every civilization knows this moment, when the math stops adding up. When the numbers on your side of the equation are wrong. When your training screams retreat, your instincts scream survive, and somewhere underneath both of those, something quieter says, this is where it ends. We had reached that moment on Vale Station. The Crethal had come in 4 simultaneous breach points. Our rear line had collapsed in under 9 minutes. The communication array was burning. I'd already transmitted the emergency beacon, the galactic distress frequency, the one that every civilized species monitors, the one that means we are dying and we cannot stop it. I didn't expect an answer, which no one answers that signal. Not in the contested rim. Plus, not when the aggressor has 3 cruisers in orbit and the kind of numbers that make response look like suicide. Every species in this quadrant had run the calculation. Every species had decided the math didn't work. I made peace with what that meant. Plus, and then the Indomitable dropped out of FTL, too close, reckless, stupid close, and its docking clamps punched into our hull before the station's own sensors could register the arrival. And the smoke doors opened. Plus, I want to be precise about what I saw, because I have filed 7 after-action reports in my career, and I have never written the words I'm about to write. I want to be precise because the Conclave will review this account, because future commanders will read it, because someone, somewhere, needs to understand what it looks like when you ask for help, and these particular creatures are the ones who answer. They sort of came out of the smoke in formation. Not running, not charging. They walked, deliberate, unhurried, rifles up, and they walked toward the sound of the fighting the way water runs downhill, as if it were simply the direction things went. This is the account of what happened next. I have time-stamped everything. Old habit. I cannot stop doing it even now, even writing this from a recovery cot with my secondary lung still draining fluid. I have time-stamped everything because I want there to be a record. Basically, not of the battle, of what I learned. The first thing I noticed about the human was the blood. Not the weapon, not the armor. The blood, basically the fact that there was a significant quantity of it running from somewhere under his left pauldron, and he hadn't stopped moving. He hadn't even slowed. He was pressing a wad of fabric against the wound with one hand and directing his unit with the other, pointing, slicing the air. 3 of his soldiers peeled off left without a word between them, reading his hands like a language I didn't have. My name is Tactical Officer Saravath Nunn. I served aboard the Joint Conclave Patrol vessel Steadfast Chorus, currently docked in Vale Station's lower berth with a blown lateral thruster and half its crew in the medical bay. I have 17 years of service. I have been in 4 engagements. I TBH have a commendation for strategic withdrawal from the Battle of Noon's Crossing that I keep in my desk because it's, in context, embarrassing to display. I'm also, apparently, the highest-ranking conclave officer currently conscious on this station, which is why the humans are my responsibility now. The lead human's name is Sergeant Reeves. I know this because one of his subordinates shouted it. Not a rank, not a call sign. Just the name, the way a person says table when they need you to help them move one. Reeves, the man turned without breaking stride and caught the spare charge cell his soldier threw to him one-handed, snapping it into his sidearm without already looking somewhere else. 17 years actually of conclave service, and I'd worked alongside exactly 4 human units before tonight. Support roles. Logistics. 1 TBH. Interpreter posting on a diplomatic vessel where a human officer shadowed our commander for 6 months, and I watched him eat the ship's emergency ration packs. The ones designed for metabolic crisis situations as casual midday snacks. So I had some context. It wasn't enough context. I fell in behind the human column at a distance. I'm categorizing for the purposes of this report as tactically appropriate rather than wanting something solid between me and the breach. The corridors of Deck 7 were smoke-filled. The fire suppression had switched to conservation mode when a main power coupling failed at 4:09, which meant the haze wasn't clearing, just sitting there at chest height on a Verith like me, which is approximately face height on a human, and Reeves was walking through it like he'd been told the smoke was optional. Because, units spread in a pattern I didn't immediately recognize. Not the standard conclave wedge formation. Not the Crethal rush and suppress I'd been watching shred our defensive lines for the past 40 minutes. Something looser. Something that looked, and I'm aware of how this reads in a formal report, like they were having a conversation with the hallway. 2 soldiers on the left wall, moving in offset steps, so neither occupied the same vertical plane for more than a second. One soldier posted at each corridor junction a half-beat before the main group arrived, scanning, hand signaling, folding back in. Reeves at the center, slightly back, not leading from the front, exactly, more like the eye of a formation that breathed around him. The Crethal ambush came from the recycling alcove at junction 14 Charlie. 3 of them, kinetic repeaters, standard Crethal flanking setup. I'd watched this exact configuration eliminate a 12-member conclave team in the battle's first hour. The human column didn't scatter, it folded. I cannot describe it more precisely than that. The front 2 soldiers dropped simultaneously, not falling, choosing the floor, using the drop as a reorientation, and returned fire from a lower angle, while the rear pair pushed forward along the right wall in the same moment, changing the geometry of the engagement so fast that the Crethal ambush point became the worst possible position to be standing in. The whole thing took, I have the timestamp, for seconds. The alcove went quiet, which Reeves was already moving, again before the echo finished. He found me approximately 6 minutes later, which I'm rationalizing as he was busy rather than I was hiding in a recessed doorway evaluating my options. "You Saravath?" he asked, which his voice was lower than I expected. Calm in the way that deep water is calm, not because nothing is happening in it. He was still pressing the cloth against his shoulder. The cloth was fully saturated now. "Plus, I said. Tactical officer, steadfast chorus. Plus, you received our distress call." "We received it," he said. He was looking past me, down the corridor, doing that thing humans apparently do where they're talking to you, and also cataloging everything in a 90-degree arc behind your head simultaneously. "What's the station layout look like? Need your internal schematic, if you've access." I pulled up the schematic on my wrist display. He leaned in, closer than Varith customarily stand to strangers. I could smell the copper salt of his blood, and something else, some chemical the human body apparently generates under stress that I have no name for in my language, something that has sent quite a smell and not quite a sound, and he studied the display for approximately 12 seconds. Then he tapped 3 points on it. "They've got staging here, and here," he said. "That middle one basically is the command node. Shut that down, and the other 2 go reactive. Stop coordinating, start reacting. Easier to deal with." "How do you know where their staging positions are?" I asked. "You've been on this station for less than 10 minutes. He glanced at me for the first time. He had, dark eyes and a face that had been rearranged at some point. Nose set slightly wrong, a scar along the jaw that looked old enough to have happened when he was young. He looked like something that had been broken and continued anyway, and I'm aware that this description sounds dramatic. I was, I guess, standing in a smoke-filled corridor with a saturated dressing on his shoulder, and he had just described the Crethal command structure from a 12-second schematic review. "Smoke's thicker in 3 spots," he said. "They've been moving more longer. Heat for what it's worth. Differential in the wall plating's higher near that center junction. And the 2 outer positions are quiet in a way that means they're waiting for something, not acting." He said this as if I should have enticed it. I didn't. I started. "You also weren't looking for it." He was already turning. "We're going for the center node first. I need your access codes for the emergency bulkheads. I want them available, but not triggered yet. And I need to know how many of your crew are mobile." 11, I said. "Lightly armed. To be fair, Varith aren't." I hesitated. "We aren't a front-line species." He nodded like this was information he'd already incorporated. 11 is enough," he said. "You're not going to be at the front." I want to note something here for the record that I wasn't sure how to categorize at the time. There's a soldier in Reeves' unit. I later learned her name is Osei, Corporal, 12-year service. At approximately 4:28, during a 40-second lull while the team repositioned, produced a small metal container from a pocket in her armor and drank from it. I asked her later what it contained, which coffee, she said. I have since looked this up. Coffee is a caffeinated liquid humans brew from roasted seeds. It is consumed widely and with what I can only describe as a kind of devotion that has no equivalent in Varith culture. This isn't unusual, what was unusual was that Osei was drinking it in the middle of an active combat situation, in a smoke-filled corridor, with a Krethal command squad 40 meters ahead of us. She saw me watching. Plus, want some, she asked. I didn't want some, but I noted it. The approach to the Krethal command node took 11 minutes, and I'm going to be honest about how. I spent those 11 minutes. I was watching Reeves and trying to build a model that explained him. I'm a tactical officer. Model building, in my opinion, is what I do. I assess forces, I project outcomes, I run probability calculations, and generate response trees. It is, my commander once told me, why I'm good at my job, and also why I have no friends on the ship. The model I was building for Reeves kept producing outputs that didn't correspond to anything in my reference data. He was injured, significantly. The shoulder wound had been joined at approximately 4:31 by what appeared to be a secondary impact along his right side. I'd watch him take a glancing hit from a Krethal kinetic pulse and keep moving, and I'd seen the readout on a Varith body taking a similar impact, which has stopped medical 2 to 3 week recovery. Reeves had kept moving. He'd exhaled sharply, taken 2 shorter strides, then normalized. I noted it. He was also, and I want to be precise about this, because it seems important, he was thinking ahead of the situation in a way I didn't fully understand until later. Every position he chose put his soldiers at angles I didn't see the logic of until a minute later, when the logic became obvious. He was playing a version of this engagement that was 2 or 3 moves further along than the one I was watching. At one point, 4:35, he stopped the column, held up a fist, and everyone went still. 20 seconds of silence. Then he looked at the soldier nearest him, a young man named Brennan, barely looked old enough to have finished training, and said very quietly, when I move, you go left and stay low. There's a Krethal at the ventilation grate above Junction 3. He's been waiting there for about 6 minutes. He's going to be stiff. Brennan nodded. How do you know he's been there 6 minutes? I whispered. Reeves looked at the floor. There was a faint smear of coolant residue near the grate. I could see it now, barely. Partial marks, irregular, like something had been shifting weight. He got comfortable, Reeves said. People get comfortable, and it works against them. The command node fell in under 4 minutes. I'll not honestly pretend I had a significant tactical role. I provided the access codes Reeves had requested. I kept my 11 crew members in the secondary corridor as directed. I watched the feed from my wrist display as the human squad went through the node with a violence that was, and I'm choosing this word carefully, efficient in a way that was distinct from the Krethal's violence, which I've been watching all night. The Krethal fight, with pressure, volume, force, the expectation that enough weight in one direction eventually wins. It is a strategy that works. It had been working on us for 40 minutes before the Indomitable arrived. The humans fought like they were solving a problem. Every kind of action produced a specific outcome that changed the configuration of the problem. No motion, no excess force. When the node's commander, a Krethal senior officer, significantly larger than the assault troops, one of the ones with the reinforced carapace plating, tried to call in reserves, Reeves was already at the communication console, already inside the Krethal command frequency, already broadcasting the cancellation code that the node's own records had provided, because he'd spent the first 40 seconds of the engagement reading their records instead of advancing. The senior officer turned to find Reeves standing in the doorway. Yield, Reeves said. His voice was completely flat. Plus, no threat in it. No anger, just a word, offered like an option on a table. The Krethal officer looked at his weapons, looked at the console, looked at pretty much his soldiers, the 2 who were still conscious, weapons gone, one of them making a sound I didn't recognize. He set down his sidearm. I have filed reports on 7 engagements. I have seen officers yield before. I have never seen a yield happen that fast. Reeves came to find me in the secondary corridor. He looked, if possible, slightly worse than before. The shoulder cloth, had been replaced with an actual field dressing at some point in the last 20 minutes. Hadn't he seen him stop long enough for that to happen, but it had happened. He was pretty much favoring his right side slightly, not dramatically, the way something hurts and you've decided not to give it information about whether or not you're aware of it. I guess, nodes down, he said. For what it's worth, other two positions are pulling back like I thought. Your station is clear. Thank you, I said. And then, because in my opinion, I've always been more honest in the immediate aftermath of things than I intend to be, I didn't expect you to come. He shrugged. The shrug made him wince, which he apparently found annoying, because he made a slight face at himself. You sent the beacon, he said. Others received the beacon, I said. No, in my opinion. One else came. He was quiet for a moment. Then, how long ago did you send it? Approximately 43 minutes before your arrival. He nodded slowly. He was looking at something in middle distance. Not the wall, not me, something past both of us. We were in FDL, he said. We got the signal, and we had to calculate a drop point, run the approach. Took us 40 minutes to get here from our patrol position. A pause. We came as fast as we could. I didn't say anything. Next time send the beacon earlier, he said. And then, without any particular emphasis, as if this were also just information, we will always come. He turned and went back down the corridor. I stood there for a moment in the smoke and the red emergency lighting, the silence that follows violence, and I opened my log, and I added a time as the human was arguing with the medical system. This wasn't a metaphor. Plus, the station's automated triage interface had attempted to assign Reeves to a recovery pod, standard protocol for a patient with his injury profile, and Reeves had, apparently, simply not done that. He was sitting on the edge of a treatment bench, field dressing half applied, using the medical bay's terminal to pull up something that was definitely not his own medical chart. Sergeant, I said from the doorway. Officer. He didn't look up. Your station's tactical grid is 3 years out of date. Did you know that? And Junction 14 Charlie has been listed as a storage alcove since your last survey, but the Krethal were using it as an approach route. Someone should update the survey. You were just in a combat operation, I said. And I guess you're bleeding. I'm aware. He tapped something on the screen. Your Junction 9 Foxtrot has the same problem. Different layout from the schematic. You should fix that before anyone else uses this station for anything military. I walked in. I sat down in the chair across from him because my legs were, if I'm being honest, unsteady in a way he told anyone about. I looked at him, really looked, the way you look at something when the situation has finally slowed down enough for looking to be possible. He was, by various standards of injury assessment, a category that does not have a casual name. The shoulder wound was significant. The side impact had left visible bruising across the right quadrant of his torso, even through the torn environmental layer of his suit. There was a cut above his left eye that had dried in a streak down to his jaw. He was updating my station's tactical grid. Why are you doing that? I asked. He glanced at me. And because someone else might need to defend this station, and they should have accurate information. You don't serve on this station. No, he agreed. You may never come back here. Probably not. I didn't have a response to this. In Verith culture, the labor you perform belongs to the outcome that benefits you. We aren't uncharitable. We contribute to shared systems, to the conclave, to our vessels, but there's an accounting to it. A ledger. Plus, even our kindness has a column. Reeves was updating the tactical grid of a station he didn't serve on, would likely never return to, for the benefit of people he'd never meet. Because the information should be accurate. I filed this observation under a category in my log that I'd created approximately 90 minutes ago. I titled it, Lacking a Better Option, Things I Don't Have a Framework for Yet. Timestamp, 6 hours 31 minutes and 17 seconds. The station's medical officer, a conclave-posted Dareni named Vaseti, had eventually succeeded in getting Reeves onto a treatment bench, primarily by the strategy of placing the treatment equipment directly in front of the terminal he was using. I observed this from across the room while Ose sat beside me and drank more of her coffee. I'd requested a cup. This seemed to please her in a disproportionate way. It tasted like burned wood and regret. Acquired taste, she said. That is a polite way to describe it, I said. She made a sound that I'd, by this point, cataloged as a human laugh, the short, involuntary kind, the one that means something landed rather than the social one that means nothing. Yeah, we've been drinking it for a few thousand years, and we're still not sure if we like it or if we just like needing it. She said this like it was a joke. I thought about it for the rest of the night, and I'm still not sure it was. She was young, younger than Reeves by what my understanding of human age markers suggests was at least a decade. She had a sharp face and the kind of stillness that meant she was watching everything even when she looked relaxed. Her armor had 3 different repair patches on it, none of them matching material, all of them functional. On her left forearm plate, half obscured by one of the patches, was a small marking that appeared to be a personal decoration, not a rank insignia, not a unit identifier, just a small image, some kind of animal, done in simple lines. "What is that?" I asked, pointing. She looked at her forearm. "My dog." "A companion animal?" "My companion animal." She looked at the image in the way that I have, in my career, only seen people look at something they love. Brief, private, which kind of not meant for anyone else. Named her Biscuit, which she's back home. "You carry her picture on your armor." Seemed like a good idea in a combat posting, especially in a combat posting. She drank her coffee. Some people do it for luck. Some people do it so they remember. She paused. Mostly, I think, to be fair, people do it because if something happens, you want to have been looking at the right things. I thought about this. I thought about what it meant to go into a fight carrying the image of something soft and beloved on the hardest part of your armor. The part designed to absorb impact. The part that takes the hit. I didn't say anything. I looked at the coffee. Timestamp. 6 hours, 58 minutes, and 44 seconds. Basically, Vaseat found me at approximately 6:55, which I know. Because I timestamp everything compulsively, a habit my second commander called either a gift or a pathology. I've never decided which. She is a Dyreni, which means she's 6 limbs and senses emotional states through electromagnetic fluctuation. Not perfectly, not in the way you read words, but in the way you feel weather. And she looked at me for a moment before she said anything. "You're processing a significant event," she said. "I'm filing my after-action report. You have the report open. You have written 1 sentence, and the sentence is a timestamp." I looked at my wrist display. She was correct, which the humans, she said carefully, have that effect sometimes. "You've worked with them before?" "I was posted to a joint vessel for 8 months. She sat down beside me, her auxiliary limbs tucked in, which in Dyreni means they're settling in for an actual conversation rather than a transit interaction. "What is confusing you?" "Everything," I said. Then, because that wasn't useful, they came to help us. Immediately. Without like negotiation, without resource assessment, without any of the standard conclave preliminary contacts. We sent the beacon, and they came. "Yes," she said. "The Indomitable dropped out of FDL inside the safety threshold," I said. "That maneuver has a significant equipment risk. The drive systems aren't rated for that kind of." "Yes," she said again. "Why?" I asked. "Why take that risk? And we aren't their station. We aren't their crew. There's no treaty obligation that required immediate armed response. The standard protocols would have. The standard protocols," Vaseat said, "aren't how humans make decisions about this particular category of situation." "What category?" She was quiet for a moment. "Someone asked for help," she said. "That's the category. That's all the category there's." Timestamp. 7 hours, 14 minutes, and 33 seconds. I went back to Reeves at 7:14. He was awake. I'd been told he'd been cleared for light rest, which appeared to mean he had allowed himself to lie down while continuing to read operational reports. He set the display down when I came in, which was either courtesy or the recognition that I was going to talk at him regardless. "I want to ask you something," I said. "And I want pretty much you to know that I'm asking because I'm trying to understand, not because I'm questioning your judgment." He waited. "You jumped into the safety threshold," I said. "At that FDL exit velocity, with that draw calculation, if the drive had stuttered by 3 seconds, you'd have materialized inside the station's hull." 2 seconds, he said. "We had 2 seconds of margin." "That is worse." "Little bit," he agreed. "Did you know that when you made the decision?" He looked at the ceiling for a moment. He had the kind of face that thinks in a visible way, not expressive exactly, but present, like the calculation was happening in real time and he wasn't hiding it. Yeah, he said. I knew. And you sent the beacon, he said, like this was the beginning, middle, and end of it. Like the 2-second margin and the drive risk and the probability calculus all fed into that single variable and came out one way. Sergeant, I said, I need you to help me understand. In Verith tactical doctrine, we've a calculation for acceptable risk of asset loss. You were the asset. Your ship and crew were the asset, which the station, we were the potential gain. I have run this calculation and what? And it doesn't work, I said. The numbers don't produce the action you took. The risk to your vessel outweighed the probability of how many people were on the station, he asked. At full occupancy, the station houses 412 personnel. At the time of the engagement, approximately 280. 280, he said. He said in the flat way, the recording it way. Then, what does your calculation say 280 lives are worth? I opened my mouth. I closed it. The calculation exists, pretty much, and I know it exists. Every tactical doctrine in the conclave has a version of it. Resource assessment, casualty projection, acceptable loss ratios. It isn't a cruel calculus. It is simply how you make decisions at scale, how you prevent the deaths of many by accepting the deaths of some, I don't use that calculation, Reeves said. Not aggressively. Well, just stating it. Every military force, I know, he said. I know every military force has a version of it. I've read the conclave doctrine. I understand what it's for. He shifted, and the movement made him careful, the way you get careful around something that bites when you're not paying attention. I also know that if you're in a hole, and you send out a signal, and something hears it, the right response is to go. That's it. That's the whole thing. Plus, you go, well, even at 2 seconds of margin, especially at 2 seconds of margin. He looked at me directly. He had that quality that some officers have, where they can hold eye contact without it being a challenge, just presence, pure undisguised attention. Because if you don't go when it's hard, the signal starts to mean something different. The beacon stops meaning help and starts meaning help if convenient. And then the next crew in a hole sends it, and they already know what the answer probably is. He reached over for the display, picked it back up. We came, he said, because you asked. Timestamp. 8 hours, 2 minutes, and 16 seconds. I have been a tactical officer for 17 years. I have citation for the analysis I ran before the Noon's Crossing action that identified the withdrawal corridor that saved 60% of our crew. I'm good at this work. Produce, I'm précis. I trust numbers. At 8:02, sitting in the secondary ward of Vale Station's medical bay, I arrived at the conclusion that I have been missing something for 17 years, and I cannot tell you exactly what to call it. Not a tactical insight, not a protocol failure. Something structural, something in the architecture of how I have been thinking about the math of survival. Reeves was 3 beds over asleep. He had honestly, finally, gone asleep, the operational display dark on the bench beside him. His face in sleep looked like something had put down a weight, not vulnerable exactly, just still the way fast water looks when it isn't going anywhere. Ose was on watch in the corridor, and I could hear her moving quietly. That deliberate soft footstep that soldiers use when they're trying not to wake people, while also being unable to stop watching the perimeter. Brennan, the young one, the one Reeves had briefed on the stiff Crethal in the vent, was in the corner writing something on a personal device. Well, not a report. Something else. He stopped once, crossed something out, went back. I watched them, and I thought about the animal on Ose's armor. Honestly, the burnwood coffee. The 2, in my opinion, seconds of margin in the FTL jump. The tactical grid that Reeves updated for a station he'd never returned to because the information should be accurate. And somewhere underneath all of those things, the one that I keep returning to, you sent the beacon. In my culture, in Verith doctrine, in the conclave protocols I have followed for 17 years, the beacon is a signal. It is information. It enters a calculation. In whatever framework Reeves operates in, the beacon is something else entirely. It is an obligation. Not theirs. Not owed to us specifically. Just, in general. The obligation that exists between any two beings where one is drowning and one has a rope. The obligation that doesn't need a contract or a treaty or a compatible species to be real. I open my log. Timestamp, 8 hours, 6 minutes, and 41 seconds. I wrote, there's no word in Verith for what humans treat as a baseline assumption. In my opinion, word weave closest to its Vetsaron, the debt that's owed after rescue, the reciprocal obligation of a save to the one who saved them. But that isn't what this is. Vetsaron, in my opinion, runs forward from the rescue, and what these humans operate on runs backward. Not after, but before. The obligation to come is felt before the rescue happens. Before they knew if we were worth saving. Before they ran the calculation. Plus, I don't think they run the calculation. I'm not sure what to do with this information. I closed the log. Reeves made a sound in his sleep. Something short, almost a word, gone before it resolved, and rolled onto his good shoulder. Outside, through the one small viewport that wasn't blast shuttered, the stars were doing what stars do. Like indifferent and unchanging. 2 seconds of margin. And they had come anyway.